Good morning. Here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about the reliability of eyewitness testimony this morning. Figure out, what factors might influence whether or not eyewitness testimony is accurate. Okay. So to get a good start on this and see, just as a nice demonstration of how unreliable it is, you see this picture. It's kind of a crudely drawn picture, but what we got here in 1947. Gordon Allport and Leo Postman, they showed people this picture. It's got a white person holding a razor blade. And so what happens is, I guess they're in a subway car there. And so what they did was, okay, I want you to describe this picture to a second person. And then the second person tell the third, tell the fourth, tell the fifth, up to the sixth. And by the time it got to the sixth telling, it almost always happened that the razor was now in the black man's hand. It just switched, right, at some point. And so this is really it was really about rumor transmission, but it's an awful good starting point for understanding the reliability of eyewitness testimony. So there's some different factors that have absolutely influenced the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Number one, general anxiety. It turns out that obviously stress, local stress, can reduce people's ability to become good eyewitnesses. And obviously, if you're witnessing a crime, there's probably localized stress. That's kind of the definition. But there's also been found that, the anxiety in your life outside of this situation or life stresses and things like this are correlated with. And so people under a lot of stress or those people that have a lot of anxiety in their lives are worse at being eyewitnesses. And so right up front, does this almost come up and say that maybe some people are better witnesses than others, and so maybe we shouldn't allow certain people to. Maybe if we can, take each witness and score them, maybe we could find out their general credibility. And so if a witness of score 19 said, I saw him do it, and a witness of score 32 said, I didn't see it, then, which one wins or something? It's kind of a fascinating thought because, and I'm going to come back to this question at the end of this slideshow, it's because even though we don't have one of these general credibility scores or something like that, this is what the juries are doing, okay? The juries are passing judgment on the witnesses, not just on the accuser or the accused, but also on the witnesses. And they are, in fact, creating a general credibility. So it sounds horrible to say we should just discredit the testimony of certain people, but since the jury's doing it already, maybe we should do it in a more scientific, controlled fashion. I don't know. It sounds scary. What about gender? Well, it has been found that genders are actually pretty good at witnesses depending on what you need to have witnessed. And obviously, things that men care about are the things that they're more likely to get. If you want to know what was the make and model and year of a vehicle that was used in a getaway car, yeah, ask a man. I'm sorry for the sexism, but generally speaking, And so when it comes to clothing or actions, females are better. Appearances, surroundings, males are better. So it depends on what it is that you're looking to get as a testimony. When it comes to age, there seems to be two impacts. Number one, young children tend to be worse witnesses, and number two, older people do. Now, the older people side, elderly people tend to be more suggestible. Their memory is worse, in particular, source amnesia. That is to say, older people are more likely to remember a memory, and it may well be a memory, but they will remember it from the wrong situation. Oh, I saw him at the post office. No, he was at the grocery store. So it was an accurate memory, but you've lost the source of it, and that can be very problematic, okay? But when it comes to young children, it's particularly troublesome. Children are more suggestible. Children often want to please grown-ups, right? Often children will, when telling a story or information, they are continually taking feedback that the adult gives them and modifying their story to get the appropriate reaction from the adult, something like that. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Children can be good eyewitnesses, but again, it's just the age that It's really hard. And again, part of the problem is often what happens is children don't even exactly realize that they're lying per se, because the story, and this is how memory works, memories change. They're not a solid object. And so as a child is telling the story, often the story that the child is telling, the child comes to truly believe the story that they have in fact created. And so quite a problem here. So number one, do not conduct interviews using dolls. That's a fact. I've seen some interesting things, and in particular, there was a big craze move to use anatomically correct dolls when interviewing children about sex abuse cases and stuff. And the problem is they took these anatomically correct dolls and they gave them to some children absolutely unrelated to the trials at hand. And the first thing the kids did was took the clothes off and started poking in the holes, and that's just what they did. That's just what children do. Okay? Often they interview children during playtime, and all of a sudden what happens is if the children are playing and an adult starts to try to get information from them, the children are basically annoyed and will basically give any answer they can possibly give so that the adult will stop bothering them during playtime. Okay? Leading and suggestive questions are also common, and it's not right. So be careful. Don't automatically just jump to treating the child as a victim, because, as I said, many absolutely non-abused children will do the same types of behaviors. Uh, yeah, I did that one. So yeah, they did this one where they had people come into a physician's office. It was a real straightforward exam, look in the ears kind of a thing. And then a couple of weeks later, they were interviewed. But when they asked them a couple of weeks later, they said, "Did the doctor touch you anywhere that he was not supposed to?" And all of a sudden, 15 people said, yeah. 15 of these children said, yes, he in fact did, with that simple question. And there was even one child who was like, yeah, he put a stick up my butt. And it was like, wait a minute, where did this come from? Okay. Well, turns out that memories are pretty flexible in this way. The classic study on this is powerful. This is Elizabeth Loftus and Palmer. I don't even know Palmer's first name, but Elizabeth Loftus. And so what happened is that people were witnessed there was a videotape of an auto accident, and so people watched the videotape, and then afterwards they would simply say how fast were the cars driving when they hit each other. And so all you're supposed to do is basically pull up your memory of this video that you watched and make an estimation of how fast cars were driving. Well, it turns out that if they ask the question, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, or how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, you got radically different responses, right? And the word hit implies a much smaller or slower accident. The word smashed implies much larger. And so what happens is people would say, oh, if you said smashed, I say 45. If you said hit, I said 32, something like that. All right, thank you very much. We'll talk to you later. Bring them back in a couple of weeks. And now you ask them, did you see glass at the scene of the accident? And those that had earlier heard the word hit had said 32 miles an hour, and now all of a sudden their entire memory of what they witnessed is now based on 32 miles an hour. And a 32 mile an hour accident is just like a fender bender and nobody gets hurt or nothing happens. And so if you had said hit earlier, now my memory is no glass. And if you said smashed earlier, now I have a memory of a 45 mile an hour accident, which is much, much more severe. And now I've got a memory that is involving accident. So the very act of asking these suggestive questions, hit versus smashed, has literally modified the memory in my brain. Not just modified the words that came out of my mouth, because when I pulled that memory out to make an estimation about the speed, I then restored that memory as a new memory. Okay? Crazy world. In a crazy one, they did this one. They showed there's two different, very similar images, one of the yield sign, one of the stop sign, and they just basically were like, was the car parked next to the yield sign or something? It was just like, when it was really a stop sign. And then later on, when they asked them to recreate the image, what happened was they let's say, for example, they saw the top image, and they were then asked afterward, did you see the car parked next to the yield sign? And then later on, they were asked to recreate the accident. They recreate a yield sign even though they actually saw a stop sign. So it's a pretty powerful effect what this information can have. Another one of the classics is this lost in a shopping mall. And in this study, what happened is, and again, this is an Elizabeth Loftus study. In fact, that last one with the stop and the yield sign was also Loftus. But what happens is they took college students, and then what they did was college students volunteered to be in a study, and then the researchers called up the parents of these students that volunteered, and they asked them, can you tell me about 4 incidents, 4 events that happened in your child's, when your child was younger? And then now that you've got 4, let me ask you this one, parents. Was there ever a case where your child was lost in a shopping mall? And the parent says no. Okay, so you've now got for each participant 4 stories that you know are true and one that you've just been told never happened by the parents. Okay, so now you bring the students in and you say, okay, I talked to the parents and they told me these 5 events that happened in your childhood. Your job is to write stories about them. And almost inevitably, these are college students, and it didn't take all that much prompting, and all of a sudden they were writing fairly long, detailed stories about all 5 of the events, one of which didn't happen. So pretty powerful demonstration of how this can go. Or here, look at this one under my face. Children were, told once a week, think real hard and tell me if this ever happened to you. Can you remember going to the hospital with the mousetrap on your finger? Okay, and so all of a sudden, after doing this for 10 weeks, 58% of the children, preschoolers, said, yeah, they remembered it. And what was crazy is that, there was the professional psychologists could not tell which were real stories and which were false stories. They were so believed. Once the children started to speak these stories, they truly and utterly believed them. So it's kind of problematic. Police interviewers should try to keep their questions free of hidden assumptions. But you know what? The police might ask, how tall was he? You're implying that, the person involved was both male and tall, right? Because otherwise, how short was she? I mean, come on. And so if you simply ask them, non-biased questions, you can get at better. But part of the problem is eyewitness testimony can be influenced. Let's say, for example, at a lineup, you've got a lineup, and in fact, look at that. There is a situation where the third person from the left is screwed, okay? So clearly that's a bad lineup. Well, what happens though is that when witnesses come into a lineup, they assume that the bad guy or a bad girl, right? Girls can be naughty too. I ain't a sexist, I'll admit it. So they're assuming that the bad person is going to be in that lineup, and so they're going to try to find that bad person. And so often it won't be recognizing, but coming up with the closest answer. And coming up with the closest answer on a multiple choice test sounds like a good solution, but not when it comes to something this large. Here, whoa, I cannot even. Oh yeah, here. What they have here, and this is powerful. You see all of these things. I mean, I can't read them here because they're too tiny, but you can because you can blow them up on your PowerPoint. But these are different phenomena that influence eyewitness testimony. And look, let's say the first one. Is it possible that the way a question is asked to an eyewitness could possibly affect their answer? 98% of eyewitness experts said yes. Yes, that's true. But only 85% of jurors agreed with that. Or the next one, I guess, the lineup instructions. Do you think the instructions that the police give at a lineup can impact identification? 98% of the experts, 41% of jurors. And the problem is if you're on trial, it's a jury of your peers, not a jury of eyewitness experts. Okay? So what we find is that it's pretty critical in a court of law that we have to deal with not the truth, but with what juries believe. And what juries believe is not always an accurate reflection of the truth. And so finally, I love this question, and I'm fairly certain it's on the exam as one of your essay choices. I think it is. I don't remember. But anyway, why is it? And I already sort of went down a little talking point earlier. But why is the testimony of some people given more weight when a jury considers the facts of a case? As an example, if I were to be called in as a witness, okay. Let's say I was, a witness for the prosecution or defense, whatever, whoever. The lawyer that calls me, the lawyer that wants me to witness for them, will introduce me as Dr. Brown. They will, all right? Now, my having a PhD and being a doctor has absolutely nothing to do with my ability to be a good eyewitness. But guess what? You just have to convince the jury. And once you put that word credibility, oh my gosh, there's a social psychology word, right? And so once you put credibility onto the name, all of a sudden everything else about them will be better. Okay? So is it morally or ethically bad? So as I said, if we can identify factors that do in fact make somebody a good or a bad witness, shouldn't we somehow score them and rank them? Because as I said earlier, I mean, this is what the jury's doing. The jury is in fact dismissing many people's testimony, right? People that have mental illnesses. Clearly, if you want to discredit a witness, all you got to do is, hey, didn't you spend time in a mental hospital 25 years ago? And then the judge is going to say that's absolutely irrelevant. Strike that from the testimony. The jurors didn't strike that. The jurors remember that, and now that witness's testimony is absolutely junk. Okay? And so it's what juries are doing anyway. So would it be morally and ethically good to perhaps make this a quantified, scientifically based judgment? Okay? I like it. That's a thinker. All right, so I will come back and finish up this topic 16 in a little while, okay? See you later.